What if beneath the tangled vines of the Amazon lies a story older than Egypt itself? Could its endless rivers be hiding cities swallowed by time, temples now covered in roots, and knowledge erased from history? Were there architects of stone and spirit who shaped a civilization long before the pharaohs ruled? Imagine a world where the true cradle of humanity was not the Nile, but the rainforest. The Amazon rainforest is the largest stretch of jungle on Earth, a place so vast and so dense that much of it still remains unseen by human eyes. For centuries, explorers, scientists, and adventurers have described it as an untamed wilderness, a natural world beyond human control. Yet growing evidence suggests that it may not have always been a wilderness. What if, beneath the vines and roots, there are cities older than Egypt, entire civilizations erased by time but waiting to be rediscovered? This question changes the way we see the forest, not as untouched nature, but as a vault of human history hidden under layers of green. The scale of the Amazon makes this mystery even more powerful. Stretching across millions of square miles, it has the ability to conceal entire empires. A lost temple could rest beneath the soil for thousands of years without a trace. A network of roads could vanish under vines, leaving behind only faint ridges in the ground. If civilizations did rise here, how many generations lived, worked, and worshipped in cities that have now disappeared without a record? Could the true cradle of human civilization have been not along the Nile or the Tigris, but deep in the rainforest? Early explorers who braved the jungle often returned with strange accounts. They spoke of wide roads that stretched straight through the trees, of mounds that seemed too regular to be natural, and of black, fertile soil unlike any other. Many of their reports were dismissed as fantasy or lies. Scholars of the 19th and 20th centuries insisted that the Amazon could not support large populations, yet the forest itself may tell a different story. Is it possible that explorers had been telling the truth all along, but the jungle covered the evidence before science could prove it? Today, technology allows us to see what was once invisible. Satellites, drones, and ground surveys now reveal strange shapes beneath the canopy. Vast geometric patterns appear where no one expected them, suggesting that the forest floor was once shaped by human hands. Could these be the outlines of lost cities, erased by centuries of rain and roots? If they are, they would rewrite our timeline of human progress. They would force us to ask whether the people of the Amazon were architects, astronomers, and farmers long before the pharaohs of Egypt raised their pyramids. The Amazon has always been a place of wonder, but perhaps its greatest wonder is not its rivers or wildlife, but the people who may have once called it home. The rainforest may be more than a wild frontier. It could be a kingdom forgotten by history, waiting to tell its story to those willing to search. What other secrets lie beneath its endless canopy? And how might they change our understanding of the world's first civilizations? Could the forest itself be guarding memories of cities older than Egypt, buried just beyond our reach? Early reports spoke of strange roads and ruins. Hit like and subscribe for more, because each new discovery could be the missing piece in rewriting the world's true history. From the very first journeys into the Amazon, strange stories began to emerge. Stories that seemed to suggest a past far richer than anyone expected. Explorers spoke of wide stone roads that cut across the jungle, of mounds that appeared to be built by human hands, and of settlements that hinted at lost cities now hidden beneath the forest. At the time, many in Europe dismissed these reports as fantasy, believing the jungle was too harsh to sustain great populations. But how could so many travelers, separated by decades and different routes, all describe similar things? In the middle of the 16th century, the Spanish explorer Francisco de Orellana returned from his voyage down the Amazon with accounts of towns filled with thousands of people, of fertile lands that stretched for miles, and of fields so carefully planted they seemed endless. His descriptions painted a picture of a thriving society, one that did not fit the common view of the rainforest as untouched wilderness. Scholars back home rejected his claims, calling them exaggerations or illusions brought on by hunger and illness. For centuries, this became the accepted truth, and Orellana's stories were written off as mistakes. Yet fragments of other reports support what he described. Missionaries and traders who followed also wrote of earthworks, straight causeways, and villages too large to ignore. Could they all have been wrong? Or were they recording pieces of a greater reality? If so, why were their words dismissed so quickly? Was it disbelief? Or was it an unwillingness to accept that an advanced culture could have thrived in South America's rainforest? In recent decades, researchers have returned to these old accounts, comparing them with new findings from satellites and surveys. What once sounded like wild tales now lines up with geometric patterns and traces of settlement seen beneath the forest canopy. Could these early explorers have been telling the truth all along? If their words were more accurate than scholars believed, then the Amazon may once have been filled with cities, temples, and roads, a land of order and culture, swallowed back into silence by time. The whispers of discovery remind us that history is not always written by what happened, but by what survived. The voices of explorers may have been doubted, but their memories still echo, urging us to look again at the rainforest, not as empty land, but as a place where a hidden kingdom once rose and fell. The rivers of the Amazon are more than winding waterways. They are the lifeblood of the rainforest, carving paths through a sea of green that stretches beyond the horizon and feeding the land with endless rain. To the people who once lived here, these rivers were not barriers, but the highways of their world. They carried food, goods, and stories from one community to another, linking distant settlements across thousands of miles in ways that only now we are beginning to understand. Today they appear as wild and shifting currents, unpredictable and dangerous. Yet what if in the past they formed an organized network of transport and trade, rivaling the great routes of the Nile or the Tigris? Along their banks, archaeologists have found traces of ancient settlements, clusters of black fertile soil, and even strange geometric patterns hidden beneath the forest canopy. Could fleets of canoes have once traveled along these waters, carrying crops, pottery, sacred artifacts, and even political messages? If so, then the Amazon was never an isolated wilderness, but a living web of cultures bound together by the rivers that cut through its heart. This idea changes the way we see the forest and its people, not as scattered tribes, but as nations connected by water. Some researchers suggest that ceremonial centers may have stood at points where rivers met, turning these junctions into bustling hubs of trade and spiritual power. Could these sites have been as important as the marketplaces of Egypt or the city-states of Mesopotamia? The river itself may have been a sacred force, its flow seen as a reflection of time and life, carrying both goods and beliefs from one shore to another. Even today, modern tribes in the Amazon use the rivers as their main routes of travel, showing how vital water remains for survival in this land. If it is so essential now, how much more important would it have been for the people of a hidden civilization thousands of years ago? Some evidence suggests that long canals and artificial channels may also have existed, carved to direct water for farming, or to connect different river systems. Could this have been a sign of advanced engineering? The work of builders who mastered the land long before outsiders thought possible. The silence of the forest hides the answers, but every new survey reveals more traces of human hands shaping the waterways. If the rivers were once true highways, then they carried more than canoes. They carried the rise and fall of kingdoms. They may have spread myths, inventions, and alliances across the rainforest, binding together a civilization that we are only now beginning to rediscover. Beneath the sound of rushing water, history itself may still be flowing, waiting for us to recognize the hidden rivers as the pathways of a forgotten world. For centuries, the idea of great cities hidden beneath the Amazon was dismissed as fantasy, a dream of explorers who wanted to believe they had found something beyond nature's reach. Yet in recent years, modern technology has forced us to look again with new eyes. Satellite scans, aerial surveys, and advanced radar systems have revealed shapes buried under the trees, lines and angles that do not belong to random growth. Vast geometric patterns appear from above, suggesting the outlines of plazas, road networks, and even entire city plans. Could these patterns be the foundations of urban centers, now swallowed by centuries of forest growth? Archaeologists studying these images have identified hundreds of earthworks scattered across the Amazon, many carved into perfect squares, circles, and straight lines that would have required organized labor and advanced planning. Could such designs have been made if only small groups lived here, or do they point instead to large and complex societies? Some researchers believe these features may represent the bones of forgotten cities, where temples, homes, and gathering spaces once stood. What if the forest itself is only a shroud, covering a vast civilization that thrived long before Egypt's pyramids were raised? The scans challenge the long-held belief that the Amazon could never support high populations. They suggest that the rainforest once rang with voices, markets, and ceremonies, echoing with the life of cities built on a massive scale. If these earthworks are the footprints of lost cities, then what lies beneath the soil? Could palaces, wooden temples, and ceremonial platforms still be hidden under layers of roots and moss? The forest is skilled at reclaiming what humans leave behind, and within a few decades, stone walls can vanish beneath thick vegetation. Multiply that by thousands of years, and entire empires may have disappeared without a trace. Yet they are not erased completely. The soil remembers. The ground holds its shape, and from above, human design still speaks through geometry, too precise to be natural. What other mysteries remain buried beneath the canopy, waiting for technology to uncover them? Could these scans be the beginning of a revolution in how we understand history, revealing that the Amazon was not wilderness, but a cradle of civilization? The evidence suggests that the world's greatest ancient cities may not all belong to deserts and river valleys of the Old World, but to the hidden jungles of South America, where silence guards the ruins of forgotten people, and where history itself waits for rediscovery. In the depths of the Amazon, scientists uncovered one of the most puzzling discoveries in modern archaeology: a soil that should not exist in a rainforest. Known as terra preta, or black earth, it appears across thousands of sites, rich, fertile, and able to grow crops for centuries without losing its strength. Unlike the thin natural soils of the jungle, which are quickly washed away by heavy rains, terra preta is dark, deep, and packed with nutrients. This soil was not created by nature, but by people. Fragments of pottery, animal bones, and charcoal mixed with organic matter reveal it was carefully engineered by human hands. How could ancient farmers, thousands of years ago, have developed a technology so advanced that it outperforms many modern soils today? Could this be evidence of a lost civilization that understood the land in ways we are only beginning to rediscover? The scale of the discovery suggests that this was no small experiment. Patches of terra preta stretch for miles, sometimes covering areas large enough to support entire towns. This indicates deliberate, large-scale agriculture, the kind needed to feed vast populations. If the soil itself could support millions, then what kind of settlements rose upon it? And how large were the societies that depended on it? Some researchers believe that the rainforest we see today was partly shaped by these people. A designed landscape rather than a wilderness. Could the Amazon itself be an ancient garden, planted and managed by civilizations long forgotten? If this is true, then the people of the Amazon were not simply surviving in a harsh environment. They were thriving, building cities and cultures on the strength of their agricultural mastery. Terra Preta's persistence is remarkable. Even after centuries, it still retains its fertility, showing that these ancient people developed a technology far ahead of its time. Modern scientists are studying its composition in hopes of learning how to replicate it for use in today's farming. What secrets did they know that we have lost? Was their knowledge handed down from generation to generation, guarded like a treasure until their civilizations collapsed? The very presence of Terra Preta forces us to reconsider the image of the Amazon as empty and untouched. Instead, it suggests that the jungle was once alive with human innovation, its soil a living monument to forgotten genius. If so, the black earth is not just dirt beneath our feet, but a record of a world where people transformed the land to sustain greatness, a hidden proof that the Amazon may have once been the cradle of a civilization older than Egypt. Deep in the silence of the Amazon, stories linger of temples once built to honor gods, ancestors, and celestial powers. Though no towering pyramids rise above the treetops today, legends carried by local communities speak of sacred places made from wood, stone, and clay, now hidden beneath roots and layers of earth. Could these vanished temples be the missing link between myth and archaeology, waiting patiently for their rediscovery? Researchers believe such structures may have stood on earthen mounds, raised above the floodwaters and decorated with carvings and paintings long since washed away by rain. What if beneath the mats of vines and moss still lie the foundations of ceremonial halls where thousands once gathered? The challenge is that wood decays quickly in the rainforest, and stone was scarce in much of the region, making the survival of temples rare. Yet fragments of carved stone, scattered pottery, and soil patterns suggest that temples may once have been central to communities, standing as symbols of power and belief. Could they have served as centers of astronomy, where priests studied the movement of the stars to guide farming and festivals? Some archaeologists suspect that the geometric earthworks revealed by satellite scans were not just villages, but sacred sites, designed with spiritual meaning in mind. If true, then the Amazon was home to ceremonial landscapes as carefully planned as those in Egypt or Mesopotamia. What rituals were performed there, and what gods were worshipped under the canopy of green? Did fire burn in great altars, or were chants carried across plazas lit by torches? Theories suggest these temples may have been painted in bright colors, their walls alive with symbols now erased by time. Could fragments of this art still survive, hidden in protected stones or buried beneath river sediments? The very lack of visible ruins today raises more questions. Were the temples destroyed in conflict, swallowed by the forest, or abandoned as populations declined? If explorers and archaeologists continue their search, might they one day uncover ceremonial masks, altars, or even preserved beams of wood that reveal the skill of their builders? Such discoveries would prove that the people of the Amazon were not only farmers and traders, but also builders of sacred centers that defined their cultural and spiritual lives. The possibility of temples beneath the soil forces us to imagine the rainforest not as an empty space, but as a cathedral of green built upon older sanctuaries of faith. If we can prove their existence, then the temples of wood and stone may change our understanding of the region forever, showing that the jungle holds not just natural wonders, but the remains of civilizations whose voices once rose in prayer beneath the stars. When we look at the mysterious shapes beneath the Amazon canopy, the question naturally arises: who built these cities? The patterns of earthworks are too precise, the alignments too deliberate to be the work of chance. Instead, they point to the hands of master builders, architects whose knowledge extended far beyond what many believed possible in this part of the world. Could these people have been engineers of forgotten kingdoms, skilled in astronomy, agriculture? The mounds, ditches, and plazas discovered so far reveal not only careful planning, but also an understanding of how to control water, how to manage soil, and how to place structures in harmony with the sky. Some formations align with the solstices, suggesting that their builders tracked celestial events with great care. What if these were not just settlements but living calendars, cities built to reflect the heavens above? The builders of the Amazon seem to have mastered techniques similar to those seen in ancient cultures across the globe. Yet their names and stories have been lost to time. Could this be evidence of parallel innovation? Or did knowledge travel across continents in ways we do not yet understand? Their architecture did not rely on towering stone monuments like those of Egypt or Mesopotamia, but on earth itself, reshaped into lasting forms that still mark the ground today. Could this choice have been symbolic, showing reverence for the land that sustained them? Archaeologists studying these sites suggest that entire communities may have contributed to construction, moving Earth in coordinated efforts that spanned generations. What does this say about their leadership and social organization? The scale of these works proves they were not the labor of scattered groups but of societies with vision, cooperation, and authority. If these were indeed the first architects of the Amazon, then they created landscapes of meaning, where roads, plazas, and fields connected both people and beliefs. What secrets remain hidden under the forest floor, waiting to reveal how far their architectural genius extended? Some argue that canals, raised platforms, and even defensive walls may have once stretched for miles, forming the framework of vast urban centers. Could these builders also have been astronomers who aligned their structures to stars, or priests who saw architecture as a form of worship? If so, their achievements may not only tell of power and skill, but of a worldview where earth and sky were joined in sacred design. The forgotten architects of the Amazon left no written records, yet their cities speak through the soil itself, whispering of a civilization that may have rivaled the greatest of the old world. Their blueprints still lie beneath the jungle, silent yet enduring, calling us to recognize that the first architects of the Amazon raised cities that could rewrite human history. When we think of the dawn of civilization, our minds often turn first to Egypt, with its mighty pharaohs and the pyramids rising from the desert sands. Yet, in the hidden depths of the Amazon, evidence suggests that builders here may have flourished even earlier, shaping landscapes and founding cultures that rivaled the old world. Could it be that the people of the Amazon created thriving societies before the first stones of the pyramids were ever laid? If so, this challenges everything we thought we knew about the timeline of human history. The geometric earthworks, the fertile black soils, and the possible remains of temples and cities point toward a civilization older than once believed. What if, while Egypt's dynasties were still forming, the Amazon was already home to organized nations with skilled farmers, astronomers, and architects? Some researchers propose that sites in the Amazon may date back many thousands of years, suggesting a depth of history that rivals the Nile Valley. Could this mean the rainforest was not only inhabited, but thriving with populations whose knowledge of agriculture and construction was advanced enough to rival, or even precede, that of Egypt? If true, this would rewrite the story of human development, proving that great civilizations did not arise only in the deserts of Africa or the river valleys of Mesopotamia, but also in the heart of South America. How many of our assumptions about the past might be wrong? The Amazon, long dismissed as an untouched wilderness, could instead have been one of the earliest centers of human innovation. Imagine large festivals held on riverbanks, ceremonial plazas, aligned with the stars, and leaders who commanded respect across vast territories. Could they have built monuments of wood and clay that vanished into the forest, leaving only hidden traces beneath the soil? If so, then the absence of visible pyramids does not mean the absence of greatness. It may mean that the forest itself became their stone, swallowing their legacy while protecting it at the same time. Why has history remembered the pharaohs of Egypt, but forgotten the rulers of the Amazon? Was it climate, disease, or war that erased their story? Or was it simply that their materials did not withstand the centuries? Theories abound, but the traces of their works remain, urging us to look deeper, to consider that the builders of the Amazon may have thrived centuries before Egypt, is to admit that history still hides chapters we have never read. The jungle, thick with secrets, may hold the key to a story older than the pyramids, a story that could change our understanding of the world forever. Across the vast Amazon, long before archaeologists began digging into the soil, or satellites traced lines beneath the canopy, stories were already being told. The indigenous peoples of the rainforest have carried oral traditions through countless generations, speaking of great cities that once stood where now only trees grow. They tell of wars that shook the earth, rulers who commanded vast territories, and gods who walked among humans, shaping the destiny of their people. Could these stories be the fading memory of civilizations that thrived and then fell, their voices now reduced to whispers in the night? Oral traditions often preserve fragments of history, mixing fact with myth, yet beneath their symbolic language may lie real accounts of events that shaped the land. When elders describe stone roads leading to gathering places, or villages so large they took days to cross, are they recalling true memories of a lost world? Could the tales of gods walking the rainforest be the memories of leaders or priests whose power was so great that they were seen as divine? Anthropologists studying these traditions note that many stories contain remarkable details, such as floods, plagues, and celestial signs, which mirror events found in the mythologies of distant cultures. How could such parallels exist unless they preserve echoes of common human experiences? If the ancestors of today's indigenous people once walked through the plazas of hidden cities, then their stories are not just myths, but living records of forgotten civilizations. Imagine a young listener, sitting by a fire, hearing of shining halls, sacred battles, and rulers who demanded loyalty from thousands. Could these accounts be memories of real cities swallowed by time? Yet why has the modern world so often dismissed these traditions as mere fables? Could it be that the truths they hold are too great, too disruptive, to fit neatly into the accepted history of human progress? The absence of written records has allowed doubt to flourish, but spoken memory can endure for thousands of years. If even a fraction of these oral traditions is rooted in fact, then the myths of the Amazon may be the last surviving testimony of a people whose greatness has been erased by the forest. In that case, every song, tale, and ritual chant becomes a thread connecting us back to a lost age of human achievement. The voices of the ancestors may still echo in the rustle of the leaves, urging us to listen more carefully. If their words are true, then history is not only written in stone or soil, but also carried in memory, waiting for us to hear, believe, and finally uncover the civilizations they remembered. Among the many myths that flow through the Amazon, few are as powerful and mysterious as those of the great serpents. Across different tribes and regions, stories speak of giant snake beings that ruled rivers, guarded sacred places, and demanded both respect and fear. Some traditions describe them as gods of water, protectors of life and fertility, while others speak of them as destroyers, bringing floods and chaos when angered. Could these serpent deities have been more than symbols? Perhaps echoes of real rulers whose power stretched across vast empires. Oral traditions often transform human leaders into divine figures over time, their authority remembered in the form of animal spirits or mythical guardians. What if the mighty serpent was the memory of dynasties that once controlled trade, commanded armies, and built cities along the rivers? Serpent imagery is not unique to the Amazon. Cultures across the world, from Mesoamerica to Mesopotamia, linked serpents to wisdom, rebirth, and divine power. Could this suggest a universal human connection, or even a shared memory of ancient rulers who projected their dominance through serpent symbols? Some researchers argue that myths of giant snakes in the Amazon might reflect real dangers of the jungle, where large anacondas still lurk in rivers, inspiring awe and fear. Yet the consistency of these myths across distant tribes suggests something deeper. Could the Serpent Empire have been a unifying force, a shared mythology that once bound different Amazonian cultures under common beliefs? If serpent deities represented empires, then their rise and fall may still be hidden beneath the forest floor, marked by earthworks and ruins waiting to be found. Imagine a time when leaders claimed divine connection to these great beings, using the serpent as their sacred emblem to inspire loyalty, demand tribute, and justify their rule. Could this explain why serpent carvings and patterns appear in Amazonian art, pottery, and ritual objects? The myths also tell of battles between serpent gods and other forces, perhaps memories of wars between rival kingdoms, retold through the language of legend. If so, then the serpent's empire was not only a mythological realm, but also a real network of power, remembered through stories passed down for centuries. What if the chants of today's tribes still echo the ceremonies of ancient rulers who believed themselves descendants of the serpent? Could following these oral traditions guide archaeologists to forgotten ceremonial centers buried beneath the jungle? The serpent myths may not be fantasies at all, but symbolic maps that lead us toward the remains of lost civilizations. If we learn to listen carefully, the serpent's empire may no longer remain a myth, but emerge as a forgotten chapter of human history, buried deep beneath the green shroud of the Amazon, waiting for rediscovery. Beneath the tangled vines and towering trees of the Amazon, archaeologists are tracing something that should not exist in a place long called wild and untouched. Straight, wide paths that cut through the jungle for miles. From the air and on the ground, their lines hold steady, crossing wetlands and ridges with the confidence of a plan. These are not animal trails or the short footpaths of daily life. They look like roads, raised above the soil in many places, and banked with shallow ditches to carry off the heavy rains. Could these routes be the remains of a far-reaching transport network, set down by skilled planners who linked towns, markets, and sacred sites? The regular width of many segments suggests standard building methods, while the long sightlines hint at survey work and shared rules for distance and direction. If communities agreed on those rules, who set them? In some regions, the roads appear to run toward mounded plazas or clusters of earthworks, as if people once gathered at fixed points for trade, ceremony, and law. What moved along these corridors? Baskets of salt and fish, jars of black earth to renew farms, carved figures for ritual, or messages of alliance between distant leaders. If warriors traveled them, what kept order along the way? Did guards patrol? Or did shrines mark the borders of each district? The raised surfaces show care for long-term use, a choice that speaks of vision beyond one harvest or one ruler. In flood seasons, the high roadbeds would have stood above water like causeways, carrying canoes dragged on rollers or goods in lines of porters. Could some routes have matched the course of stars for timing festivals, or aligned to the sun at planting days to guide the year? Along the edges, Small platforms appear in places like beads on a cord. Were these way stations for travelers, rest areas, or toll points that fed the wealth of a central power? If tolls were taken, then records were kept. And if records were kept, there must have been officials who enforced the rules of the road. The forest has tried to reclaim every line with roots and leaf fall. Yet the ground still holds the shape, and tools like satellite imaging reveal the pattern with striking clarity. What else lies hidden under the canopy? Feeder paths, bridges, or ferry landings that once joined the main arteries. If the network stretched across thousands of miles, then ideas traveled with goods, styles of pottery, types of houses, and the very stories people told about the world. Could these roads be the strongest sign that the Amazon was not a patchwork of small groups, but a connected zone with shared law and purpose? The roadways in the forest challenge old ideas and invite a new map, one where the jungle is not a barrier, but a stage shaped by human hands, where direction and distance bound a civilization together. In the heart of the rainforest, where thick clouds often block the sky, there is growing evidence that ancient people of the Amazon were not only builders of roads and cities, but also careful watchers of the heavens. Archaeologists have uncovered circular earthworks and mound alignments that appear to mark the positions of the sun at solstices and equinoxes, suggesting that these societies tracked the rhythm of the year through the movement of the stars. Could this mean their understanding of time and cycles rivaled the calendars of the Old World? Many of these structures are massive, their geometry precise, with openings that line up with sunrise or sunset on key days. This shows not just random digging, but a deep knowledge of astronomy and planning. If the people of the Amazon built these observatories, then who were the astronomers that guided their construction? And how were their skills passed down? What role did these star watchers play in society? Were they priests, scientists, or rulers whose power came from their ability to predict the rains and floods? Just as the Nile and the Tigris relied on calendars to mark planting and harvest, so too would the Amazon demand timing to manage floods, crops, and ceremonies. Could it be that these early astronomers created systems as advanced as those of Egypt or Mesopotamia, yet hidden beneath forest soil rather than carved in stone? Some researchers believe that myths of sky serpents, bird gods, and fire from the heavens may contain encoded astronomical knowledge, stories designed to carry star lore through generations. If so, what celestial events are hidden within these tales? Eclipses, comets, or the long dance of the planets? The precision of earthworks shows that people gathered and worked together for a purpose greater than survival, uniting communities under shared knowledge of the cosmos. Might these gatherings have been moments of unity, where thousands came to witness the rising of the sun through a sacred gateway, confirming the power of the leaders who had predicted it? If the Amazon once had a calendar system tied to the stars, then it rewrites how we think about the intellectual reach of its civilizations. Were these people simply farmers and traders? Or were they philosophers who studied the heavens and sought meaning in the endless patterns of the night sky? The forest today hides their observatories, yet the soil still holds their marks, and when the stars rise over the canopy, one can wonder if the same constellations guided their choices just as they still guide ours. The astronomers of the Amazon may have known more than we imagine, shaping time itself through the language of the stars, leaving us a puzzle that challenges the very limits of our history. High above the forest, where satellites and aircraft pierce the endless green, enormous shapes begin to emerge from the land. Circles, squares, and intricate lines cut into the earth form what are now called geoglyphs, vast designs that can only be truly seen from the sky. These earthworks stretch across hundreds of miles, hidden for centuries beneath the growth of the Amazon. Some measure hundreds of feet across, with ditches and embankments carved so precisely that their geometry rivals the great monuments of the Old World. Could they have been ritual spaces where communities gathered to honor their gods? Or were they vast markers of territory, designed to be visible from the heavens? The mystery deepens as researchers find that many of these shapes align with celestial events: the rising and setting of the sun, or the path of stars. If this is true, were the geoglyphs calendars in the earth, recording time and guiding planting and harvests? Others argue they may have been part of trade networks, with the shapes acting as hubs for exchange and meeting points for distant peoples. Yet there is another possibility, one that sparks debate. Could they have served as signals, messages carved for beings above, whether gods, ancestors, or something beyond our understanding? If so, then who were these messages meant for, and what answers might we find in their patterns? The sheer effort required to build them shows careful planning and coordination, with thousands of workers moving soil and shaping the land over many years. This was not the work of small scattered groups, but of a people united by vision, discipline, and knowledge. What leader or council directed such projects, and what purpose justified the labor? Could it be that the geoglyphs are the silent signatures of a civilization older than Egypt? Their meanings lost, but their presence undeniable. Some indigenous traditions still speak of sacred places on the land, echoing the memory of spaces that may once have held great ceremonies. If we listen to these voices, are we hearing the last faint traces of the geoglyph builders? The forest has grown back, covering many of these designs, but modern eyes from the sky reveal what the earth has hidden. The mystery of the geoglyphs is not just about shapes in the soil. It is about a story of human ambition, imagination, and perhaps even communication with forces greater than ourselves. As we study their patterns, the question grows louder: what truths are still waiting to be uncovered, and how might they change everything we think we know about the Amazon and the dawn of civilization? Deep within the Amazon, where every tree, vine, and root hides unknown secrets, stories of ancient healers have been carried through time. Shamans of the rainforest are known to use hundreds of plants with precise skill, creating medicines that modern science still struggles to understand. Could this vast knowledge have been inherited from a civilization long forgotten, one that catalogued the jungle's pharmacy with care and purpose? The use of plants like ayahuasca, with its complex mixture of ingredients, suggests not chance discovery, but a system of trial, record, and teaching passed across generations. How could early people, without written language or laboratories, have discovered which plants cured pain, healed wounds, or even altered the mind to bring visions? Some researchers believe this mastery points to networks of knowledge shared across villages and perhaps stored in centers of learning now lost beneath the soil. Could there have been ancient schools where healers trained, memorizing recipes and rituals that linked medicine with the sacred? Oral traditions speak of forest spirits and gods guiding shamans to the right plants. But what if these tales are echoes of a structured science, carried out by experts who tested, observed, and passed down results as carefully as any old-world physician? If the Amazon once held great cities, then it likely held healers with a role as vital as priests or rulers. Were these shamans the guardians of health, tending to the sick, guiding childbirth, and keeping balance between people and nature? The rainforest is home to tens of thousands of plant species, many still unknown to modern medicine, yet indigenous people use them with confidence. Could their knowledge be the last surviving trace of a lost tradition, one rooted in the golden age of the Amazon's hidden civilization? Today, scientists find that many drugs, from painkillers to heart treatments, come from rainforest plants, showing that the wisdom of shamans holds truths recognized by modern laboratories. If this is so, Then what discoveries have been lost with the fading of languages and the clearing of forests? Could the ancestors of the Amazon have held cures for diseases we still battle? Secrets buried as surely as their cities. Imagine temples not of stone but of plants, where each leaf and root was a page in a living library. The healers of the rainforest may have been the librarians of this knowledge, preserving health and wisdom through rituals that blended science and spirit. If their knowledge truly descended from a great civilization, then their chants and potions are not only cultural treasures, but fragments of a much larger system of human understanding. The forest itself may be the last remaining witness, its plants still holding the keys to mysteries of life, health, and survival, waiting for those who know how to see and listen. In the whispers of the leaves and the wisdom of the healers, we may find a connection to the very heart of a civilization older than Egypt, still alive in the breath of the rainforest today. Across the Amazon, myths speak of figures who did not rise from the earth but descended from the heavens. These stories, carried through generations of oral tradition, tell of radiant beings who brought fire, knowledge, and order to the people of the forest. Could they have been remembered as gods? Or were they ancestors whose power and wisdom seemed so great they were described as coming from the sky itself? In some traditions, these sky beings taught the secrets of farming, showing people how to tame the land and prepare the soil. In others, they brought healing knowledge, guiding shamans toward plants that cured sickness. What if these tales are not only symbolic but rooted in real encounters, moments when advanced visitors, whether human or something more, interacted with the early people of the Amazon? Similar stories appear in cultures far beyond South America, from Mesopotamia's tales of heavenly visitors to the star gods of Africa and Polynesia. Could this point to a universal memory of ancient encounters? Or is it evidence that a lost global network of knowledge once connected distant lands? Archaeologists remain cautious, seeing these myths as metaphors. Yet the consistency of the stories across tribes raises questions. Why do so many cultures recall teachers from the sky if it is only imagination? Could the memory of these visitors be tied to leaders who used astronomy and technology so advanced for their time that they appeared divine? Or might they be echoes of contacts with cultures whose knowledge surpassed local traditions? Traders or travelers who arrived by river or sea and left a lasting impression. Some researchers even ask whether the myths recall something beyond human, advanced beings who chose to guide the growth of early civilizations. If so, what did they want, and why the Amazon? The stories describe them as tall, glowing, or feathered, always linked to the heavens, always carrying power. Could their arrival have sparked the building of the great earthworks, roads, and calendars we now uncover? If these sky gods inspired construction and knowledge, then their influence shaped the very course of history in the rainforest. Were they worshipped as divine beings, or honored as ancestors whose memory grew into legend? Could their teachings have created systems of law and order that lasted long after they vanished? If we take the stories seriously, then they may preserve an account of guidance that modern history has forgotten. The forest today still echoes with chants that honor beings from the sky. And the question remains, were these gods, ancestors, or advanced visitors who chose to share wisdom with humanity? If the Amazon once welcomed such figures, then the myths are not fantasy but records of encounters that changed a civilization. To explore them is to step into a mystery that may reshape not only how we see the Amazon, but how we see the origins of human knowledge itself. The Amazon is a land of rivers, a vast maze of winding waters that cut through dense forests and floodplains, shaping every aspect of life. For ancient people, these rivers were more than routes of travel. They were the lifelines of entire kingdoms. Along their banks, Archaeologists now find traces of settlements, earthworks, and raised fields, signs that large populations once clustered where the water could support their needs. Could it be that the Amazon's rivers formed the backbone of a hidden network of kingdoms, their influence stretching across thousands of miles? Evidence suggests that communities built raised causeways and canals to control the flow of water, turning swamps into farmland and creating transport systems that rivaled those of the Old World. If this is true, then the rivers were not barriers but highways, carrying goods, ideas, and people between distant centers. Some researchers propose that fleets of canoes traveled these waters, linking communities with trade in salt, ceramics, textiles, and foods. What if these waterways also carried messages of religion and law, spreading the influence of rulers from one end of the basin to another? The sheer scale of the Amazon's river system makes the idea of connected kingdoms possible, with each major tributary acting as the heart of its own region, united through commerce and ceremony. Could the mighty rivers have served as the stage for diplomacy, where leaders met at sacred sites to settle disputes or form alliances? Indigenous oral traditions speak of journeys by river that lasted months, suggesting that people understood the waterways as paths to distant lands and foreign powers. If so, then the kingdoms of the Amazon were not isolated, but part of a greater whole, bound together by the currents that shaped their world. The rivers also provided food in abundance, from fish to turtles, supporting populations far larger than once believed possible. Could this explain how such massive earthworks and geoglyphs were built, with labor fed and sustained by the endless harvest of the water? The rivers may also have inspired myth and ritual, their flooding and receding tied to the cycles of life and death, planting and harvest. Were they worshipped as living beings, their currents seen as the veins of gods who nourished the land? If so, then religion and daily survival were bound together in every drop of water. Perhaps river chiefs rose in power as they controlled crossings and passages, their authority growing as trade and ritual centered on their domains. The river kingdoms remind us that what appears as wilderness today may once have been a vibrant map of human settlement. Kingdoms hidden from history, waiting for rediscovery. If we could see the Amazon not as a blank space but as a world of interconnected states, how different would the story of civilization appear? Could these river kingdoms have rivaled Egypt or Mesopotamia in their complexity, their memory carried only in the whispers of water and the silence of the trees? Deep within the Amazon, hidden beneath centuries of forest growth, archaeologists have found earthworks that seem to take the shape of fortresses. Unlike the open plazas and ceremonial geoglyphs, some of these mounds are built with raised walls, ditches, and embankments that suggest defense rather than ritual. Could it be that these ancient communities faced enemies, or even waged wars, to protect their territories? The structures are often placed on higher ground, overlooking rivers or valleys, as though their builders wanted to watch the movement of people from a position of strength. Some researchers believe these mounds may have been fortresses, complete with guarded entrances and complex networks of trenches. What if the Amazon, often imagined as a place of endless harmony with nature, was instead home to rival kingdoms, each struggling for control of trade routes, farmland, and sacred sites? Indigenous oral traditions speak of battles between clans and stories of warriors who defended their villages with skill and courage. Could these tales be the echoes of wars fought thousands of years ago, now buried beneath the canopy? The Amazon's rivers, while serving as lifelines, may also have been the very paths along which invasions traveled, carrying armies in canoes to strike deep into enemy territory. What if these hidden fortresses were the last lines of defense against such raids, protecting not only lives but also sacred knowledge and treasures? Some suggest that the ditches around the mounds may have been filled with water, creating moats that slowed attackers. A level of planning rarely credited to Amazonian societies. If true, this would mean that these people possessed advanced military strategies, balancing offense and defense with remarkable skill. Could alliances and rivalries have shaped the Amazon just as they did in the Old World, with battles deciding who would rise and who would fall? The scale of some earthworks hints at conflicts involving large populations, suggesting that warfare may have been central to the story of these lost civilizations. The forest has reclaimed much of this evidence, but the soil still carries the marks of burned wood and broken pottery, signs of lives interrupted, villages destroyed, and perhaps entire cultures erased. Were these wars fought between human kingdoms alone? Or could they have been remembered later as battles against serpent deities or sky gods, blending memory with myth? The silence of the jungle hides the answers, yet the shape of the mounds tells us that conflict was real. If wars were fought here, then the lost civilizations of the Amazon were not fragile but resilient, facing threats with ingenuity and strength. Their fortresses, though overgrown, stand as a testament to survival in a world where peace was never guaranteed. Could it be that beneath the vines and roots lie the ruins of epic struggles, wars that rivaled those of Troy or Babylon, now forgotten, except in the earth's quiet memory? The hidden fortress is more than a mound of soil. It is a story of courage, loss, and the relentless drive of people to defend their home. For centuries, the idea of vast civilizations hidden in the Amazon was brushed aside by scholars and explorers alike. Early accounts from conquistadors and missionaries describing cities of gold, broad highways, and fortified towns were labeled as exaggerations or outright lies, their words reduced to fantasies of men desperate for glory. But what if these reports were not mistakes, but memories of a reality we were never meant to remember? Some argue that the silence around Amazonian civilizations was not just ignorance, but a deliberate act to preserve the accepted timeline of history. Could the world of academia, influenced by colonial powers, have chosen to hide truths that threatened their control of knowledge? For European empires, the myth of a savage and untouched wilderness served as justification for conquest, framing the Amazon as a blank canvas to be claimed, rather than a land once ruled by advanced peoples. If it was admitted that mighty kingdoms thrived here, would colonial powers have been forced to see the region's people as equals rather than obstacles? Archaeological evidence of earthworks, terra preta, and geoglyphs directly contradicts the old narrative of primitive tribes, yet these discoveries were often buried in obscure journals, ignored by mainstream historians. Could this pattern reveal a quiet suppression of evidence, a conspiracy of silence that shaped what we believe about the past? Indigenous voices, too, were often silenced, their oral traditions dismissed as myth rather than valuable records of history. But what if these songs and stories preserved memories of cities, wars, and rulers erased by foreign interests? The lack of recognition for centuries of indigenous knowledge may itself be one of the greatest historical crimes, a theft not only of land, but of truth. Some researchers suggest that the destruction of ancient remains was intentional, as colonial expansion demanded control of fertile lands. What treasures might have been burned, buried, or lost forever, to ensure that no rival story of civilization could challenge the dominance of Europe's narrative? Could it be that we walk today on soil hiding ruins, silenced not by accident, but by design? The very idea that Amazonian civilizations may predate Egypt threatens the story of human progress, told for generations in classrooms across the world. If acknowledged, such discoveries would force a rewriting of world history, giving the Amazon its rightful place as a cradle of civilization. Is it possible that the conspiracy of silence was never about doubt, but about fear. Fear that our understanding of humanity's rise would crumble under the truth. As new technology like satellite imaging and LiDAR exposes what lies beneath the canopy, the conspiracy grows harder to maintain. The forest whispers its secrets, and each discovery makes the silence more suspicious. Could it be that what has been hidden for so long is not only the story of the Amazon, but also the story of how history itself has been shaped, guarded, and sometimes erased to serve the powerful? Beneath the forest floor, researchers are uncovering signs of advanced engineering that once shaped the Amazon into a landscape of human design. Far from being untouched wilderness, the land appears to have been carefully managed by builders who created canals, fish farms, and raised fields that stretched for miles. These were not small works of chance, but vast systems showing foresight, cooperation, and intelligence. What if the people of the Amazon were not simple gatherers, but engineers who mastered one of the most challenging environments on Earth? The raised fields, sometimes extending for hundreds of yards, allowed crops to grow above the floodwaters, while canals drained excess water and ensured survival during heavy rains. Fish farms, built with networks of channels and ponds, provided food year-round, supporting populations far larger than outsiders once believed possible. Could it be that the rainforest, often seen as hostile to farming, was actually transformed into a garden by these forgotten engineers? The sheer scale of these projects suggests planning across generations, with knowledge of soil, water, and climate that rivals the work of civilizations in Egypt or Mesopotamia. Yet for centuries, these achievements were dismissed as accidental, ignored in favor of the narrative that the Amazon was a place of scattered tribes living at nature's mercy. Why was such brilliance forgotten, erased from the story of human progress? Some scholars believe that colonial expansion destroyed much of this knowledge, replacing engineered landscapes with plantations that erased the past. Others argue that the silence around Amazonian engineering was intentional, part of the larger conspiracy to maintain Europe's version of history. Could these canals and fields have been mapped to celestial patterns, blending agriculture with astronomy in ways we are only beginning to grasp? Indigenous traditions speak of ancestors who shaped the land so that food would never run short. Guardians who taught their people how to live with the floods and droughts. Are these stories echoes of the master engineers who once walked this forest, leaving behind systems that still enrich the soil today? Terra Preta, the black earth of the Amazon, is one of the strongest pieces of evidence of their skill. Soil engineered with charcoal and organic matter that remains fertile even after centuries. What other secrets might still lie beneath the vines, waiting for us to see the Amazon not as wilderness, but as the product of deliberate human design? If these systems were so advanced, then the societies who created them were not primitive, but highly organized, their survival tied to knowledge, as precise as any old-world culture. The forgotten engineers remind us that history is often told by those who overlook voices in the shadows. Could it be that the real story of civilization is not only about pyramids and palaces, but also about canals winding through the jungle and fields raised against the flood? If we look closer, the forest may still whisper the memory of those who built a world meant to last. The story of the Amazon's lost civilizations may not have ended in glory, but in tragedy. Evidence suggests that at some point, the vast network of cities, roads, and farms crumbled, leaving only faint traces beneath the canopy. What could have caused such a collapse? Some scholars point to the arrival of Europeans in the 15th and 16th centuries, bringing diseases that swept through populations with devastating speed. Smallpox, influenza, and measles, carried unknowingly across oceans, could have killed millions, leaving empty villages and silent fields in their wake. Could this sudden wave of sickness have been enough to erase centuries of progress in just a few generations? Others argue that conquest and violence played their part, as colonial expeditions destroyed communities, enslaved survivors, and dismantled cultures. If so, then the silence of the jungle is not natural, but the echo of conquest. Yet another theory points to climate change, suggesting that long droughts may have weakened societies already facing outside threats. What if floods, fires, and shifting weather patterns destabilized kingdoms, undermining the systems that once supported them? Archaeologists find signs of abandoned earthworks, canals choked with sediment, and fields overtaken by weeds, proof that human hands once shaped them, but then suddenly stopped. Could the collapse have been a combination of all three forces? Disease, conquest, and climate, striking together to erase civilizations from history's view. Indigenous oral traditions speak of great suffering, of gods turning away, of cities lost to fire and flood. Are these stories echoes of the catastrophe that ended an age? Some researchers suggest that survivors fled deeper into the forest, merging with smaller tribes, carrying fragments of their knowledge in whispers passed down over time. Could the shamans who later held knowledge of the plants and rivers have been heirs of this fallen world? The mystery of the collapse raises another question. Why was it so complete that for centuries, even the memory of these civilizations was doubted? Perhaps the rainforest itself played a role, reclaiming walls, plazas, and homes with relentless speed, burying entire cities in roots and vines. Within decades, stone and wood could vanish beneath the green, leaving behind only shadows detectable today by satellites and LiDAR. Is it possible that under every stand of trees lies the ghost of a kingdom once proud and powerful? If so, then the story of the Amazon is not one of absence, but of endurance, a reminder that civilizations can rise and fall without ever fully disappearing. Their ruins remained beneath the trees, hidden but not erased, waiting for the moment when human eyes and curiosity would return to find them. The Great Collapse is both an ending and a beginning, for in the silence of the forest lies the evidence of resilience, a story still waiting to be told in full. Long before the banks of the Nile turned golden with harvests, the people of the Amazon may have been farming on a scale that challenges everything we thought we knew about early agriculture. Archaeologists studying the rainforest have found evidence of domesticated plants like cassava, maize, and peanuts, cultivated not in small patches but across broad landscapes that could have fed millions. Could it be that Amazonian farmers were among the first to shape crops to human needs, rivaling or even predating the agricultural revolutions of Egypt and Mesopotamia? The presence of terra preta, the rich black soil created by mixing charcoal, compost, and organic waste, shows that these ancient farmers were not merely planting, but improving the land itself, ensuring fertility for generations. What if this soil was part of a system so advanced that it allowed communities to thrive in one of the world's most challenging environments? Evidence suggests that raised fields kept crops safe from floods, while irrigation channels balanced water supply in times of drought. Could this careful balance of water and soil have created an agricultural machine far ahead of its time? Some scholars believe that the scale of food production in the Amazon may have been large enough to support vast urban centers, with populations that rivaled those of ancient Egypt. If true, then the story of human civilization cannot be told without including the farmers of the Amazon, yet their achievements have long been ignored, overshadowed by the pyramids and temples of more visible cultures. Why were these farmers forgotten when their knowledge may have been equal, or even superior, to their old world counterparts? Indigenous traditions speak of ancestors who tamed the land, teaching their people how to plant, harvest, and store food for lean times. Could these stories be echoes of the first agricultural scientists, whose discoveries shaped diets for thousands of years? Crops from the Amazon, like cassava, are still staples today, feeding billions across the globe. What if their cultivation began not with small tribes, but with large, organized societies that mapped out fields with precision and intent? Some researchers argue that the genetic diversity of Amazonian plants proves that human hands guided their development, a sign of experimentation and innovation stretching back thousands of years. Could it be that the Amazon was not only a rainforest, but one of the earliest breadbaskets of the world? The silence of history may have erased the names of these first farmers, but their work endures in every harvest that still grows from their ancient crops. Their story reminds us that civilization is not only built with stone and monuments, but also with seeds and soil, patiently shaped by generations who understood the rhythms of the earth. If the Amazon's first farmers were capable of feeding millions, how much else might they have achieved? And how much of their legacy remains hidden beneath the trees, waiting for rediscovery? For centuries, the Amazon has been described as untouched wilderness, a chaotic sprawl of endless trees and rivers beyond human influence. Yet new evidence tells a very different story, one that suggests the forest itself may have been designed, planted, and shaped by ancient hands. Archaeologists studying plant distributions have discovered that many useful species, such as Brazil nuts, cacao, and fruit-bearing palms, grow in dense clusters not by chance, but by design. Could it be that ancient Amazonians carefully planted these trees to create food-rich landscapes, orchards hidden within the green? The forest may not be wild at all, but a living monument to the planning and labor of millions. Researchers argue that entire regions of the Amazon contain a higher density of edible and medicinal plants than would occur naturally, evidence of human guidance across vast areas. What if the rainforest we know today is actually the result of ancient botanical engineering, a garden disguised as wilderness? Terra preta soils found beneath the forest floor strengthen this theory, showing that the land was enriched to sustain crops and trees in areas that would otherwise be poor for farming. Could this mean that the people of the Amazon transformed their entire environment, building a sustainable ecosystem that endured for centuries? Indigenous oral traditions speak of ancestors who taught how to live with the land, planting forests that gave food, shelter, and medicine to all. Are these traditions the memory of those who turned the jungle into a home by design? If true, the Amazon may not be a natural forest at all, but the largest cultivated garden in human history, its scale dwarfing even the farms of Egypt and Mesopotamia. Some researchers suggest that by shaping the forest, these ancient people created resilience against droughts and floods, ensuring that resources would always be available. What if the very survival of these civilizations depended on their ability to make the forest itself into a partner, not an obstacle? The patterns of plant growth, the soil composition, and the remnants of ancient villages all point to a landscape deliberately engineered to serve human needs. Could it be that every tree, every cluster of fruit, was chosen and placed by hands long forgotten? The implications are profound, forcing us to rethink what wild truly means. If the Amazon was planted, then its people were not just farmers but ecological architects, designing a system that still functions today. The silence of the forest hides their names, but their work continues to feed animals, humans, and the soil itself. Perhaps the forest we see now is their greatest legacy, a living monument far larger and more enduring than stone pyramids or temples. If we accept that the Amazon was shaped by design, how much else about history must be rewritten? Could the story of civilization be incomplete without the forest that was planted? A vast reminder that human hands once molded one of Earth's greatest wonders. Beneath the endless green of the Amazon, archaeologists are uncovering the faint outlines of roads, straight and wide, once alive with travelers moving between distant settlements. Today, They appear as nothing more than raised lines covered in vines and silence. But in the past, they may have been the arteries of an interconnected world. Could it be that these vanishing roads reveal the scale of a civilization far larger than we have imagined? Some of the roads stretch for miles, cutting through difficult terrain with a precision that suggests advanced planning and coordination. What if these roads connected cities, ceremonial centers, and farmlands, allowing goods, knowledge, and culture to flow across vast distances? Indigenous oral traditions speak of journeys along great paths where traders and pilgrims walked side by side. Are these stories echoes of the highways now buried beneath roots and soil? The roads may also have been designed with symbolic meaning, laid out to mirror the stars above, or to align with sacred rivers and mountains. Could their builders have combined engineering with cosmology, making each path not only practical, but also spiritual? Some researchers suggest that the sheer width of these roads, some nearly 100 feet across, points to use by large numbers of people at once, perhaps even processions or rituals. If true, then these paths were more than trade routes. They were stages for the movement of entire communities. Yet today, the forest reclaims them, turning what was once a vibrant network into hidden scars on the earth. Why did they vanish so completely from human memory? Disease, conquest, and collapse may have emptied the roads, leaving nature to cover what remained. Could it be that the silence of the jungle hides not only forgotten cities but also the very connections that bound them together? Satellite imaging has revealed more of these networks than explorers on the ground could ever see, suggesting that hundreds of miles of roads once laced the basin. What does it mean if the Amazon was once as well connected as the Roman Empire, with highways of its own? Some argue that the roads prove centralized power, rulers who organized labor on a massive scale. Others believe they were community projects, built cooperatively to link allies and neighbors. Could both be true, with different regions reflecting different political systems? The vanishing roads remind us that civilizations thrive not only in stone, but also in earth and wood, materials that vanish quickly when abandoned. Yet even as the jungle hides them, the memory of movement remains written in the land. If we could walk these roads as they once were, lined with travelers carrying goods, songs, and stories, how different would we see the Amazon? The silence we find today is not emptiness, but a pause in a history still waiting to be heard. The vanishing roads are not gone. They are waiting for us to follow them back into a lost age of connection. Deep in the soil of the Amazon lies evidence of an ancient secret: the mysterious black earth known as terra preta. Unlike the thin, fragile soil of most of the rainforest, this rich, fertile ground remains productive for centuries, capable of sustaining crops long after normal farmland would be exhausted. Scientists believe it was created by people who used controlled fire, mixing charcoal with compost, fish bones, and plant matter to build soil that could endure the ages. Could this practice, sometimes called the eternal fire, be the legacy of teachers whose knowledge has long been forgotten? The discovery of terra preta challenges the old belief that the Amazon could never have supported large populations. What if, instead, millions thrived here because they mastered the science of soil? The controlled use of fire was more than simple survival. It was a technology that transformed the land into farmland capable of feeding kingdoms. Some researchers argue that this knowledge was carefully taught, passed down through generations with rituals and rules, ensuring the fires were used with purpose rather than destruction. Could these lessons have come from a lost order of farmers, or even from ancient visitors who shared their wisdom with early Amazonians? Indigenous oral traditions often speak of ancestors who brought fire not only for warmth, but for growth, shaping the earth so it would never fail to provide. Are these myths in fact memories of the people who first harnessed fire as a tool of abundance rather than ruin? The scale of Terra Preta stretches across thousands of square miles, far too vast to be an accident. What if the entire Amazon basin was once patterned with these fire-enriched soils, forming a network of farmlands that fed great cities and sprawling settlements? The permanence of the soil raises another mystery. How did ancient people discover a formula that modern science is still struggling to fully replicate? Some suggest that their understanding of chemistry and ecology was far deeper than we give credit, pointing to a tradition of experimentation and observation that lasted for centuries. Could it be that these eternal fires were part of a larger system of knowledge, one that combined farming, astronomy, and medicine into a unified worldview? The evidence implies that the makers of Terra Preta were not isolated tribes, but organized societies capable of large-scale planning and innovation. Their soils still remain fertile today, proof that their vision was designed to last. Why, then, was this story hidden? And why are these engineers of fire remembered only in fragments? Perhaps their legacy was lost in the Great Collapse, erased by disease and conquest, leaving behind only the black earth as testimony. Yet the soil itself whispers of continuity, still feeding crops centuries later, still alive with the memory of its creators. If the eternal fires were once guided by forgotten teachers, then what else might they have known? And how much of their wisdom waits, hidden beneath the trees, for us to rediscover? Legends whispered through generations speak of rivers of gold hidden deep within the Amazon, where idols of shining metal were said to glow under the torchlight of ancient temples. Explorers who ventured into these lands centuries ago returned with strange tales of golden ornaments, masks, and statues that seemed to suggest entire civilizations had once worked the earth for precious metals. Some chroniclers dismissed these accounts as fantasy or exaggeration, stories meant to excite wealthy patrons in Europe. Yet fragments of evidence, from small artifacts found in riverbeds to oral traditions still carried by indigenous tribes, hint that these stories may not be myths at all. Could it be that temples covered in vines and earth still hold caches of treasures waiting to be revealed? If gold was indeed abundant, what did it mean for those who lived here? Was it a resource for trade, a symbol of divine connection, or a gift believed to come from the gods themselves? The mystery grows deeper when we consider that many cultures across the world revered gold not simply for wealth, but for its link to the sun, eternity, and spiritual power. In the Amazon, perhaps gold served as a bridge between people and celestial beings they believed guided their destiny. If so, the so-called gods of gold were not just rulers but intermediaries between earth and sky. This raises new questions. Were the shining idols simply offerings, or tools in rituals meant to call upon higher powers? And if such treasures once filled grand temples, where have they gone? Some suggest they were melted down by invading forces, their spiritual power stripped and lost. Others argue they remain buried beneath layers of jungle soil, guarded by silence and time. What if a discovery of such a temple was made tomorrow? Would it rewrite everything we thought we knew about the reach of ancient wealth and faith in the New World? Could it also show that the Amazon once rivaled Egypt and Mesopotamia in its grandeur? Legends of golden idols have fueled the imaginations of treasure hunters for centuries. But behind the lust for riches lies a far greater truth. The obsession with gold itself tells us about the values of the people who shaped these lost kingdoms. And it reminds us of a civilization that may have thrived with spiritual and material riches long before history was written. Whether hidden by design, destroyed by conquerors, or reclaimed by the earth, the gods of gold still echo in the forest's silence, daring us to search for answers. Hidden across the Amazon, carved stones lie half buried in soil and wrapped in moss, their surfaces etched with faces, animals, and symbols that whisper of a lost culture. These markings suggest that ancient peoples were not only builders of cities but also storytellers, carving their histories and beliefs into stone as a way to outlast the jungle's relentless growth. Some of the carvings show jaguars and serpents, sacred animals tied to myths of power and transformation, while others reveal human faces with eyes that seem to watch us from across centuries. Could these figures be ancestral guardians, forever marking the places where rituals were once held? Archaeologists who study these carvings argue that they reveal a symbolic language, a spiritual code designed to connect the living to their gods and ancestors. What might these carvings tell us about a people who may have lived before Egypt's first pyramids were even dreamed of? If the Amazon was home to such builders, then perhaps their spiritual life was just as advanced as their farming and city planning. The carvings also hint at connections between distant regions. Similar patterns have been found carved into rocks hundreds of miles apart, suggesting a shared belief system across vast distances. Were these symbols a sacred code that united kingdoms hidden under the forest canopy? Could these markings have been used to track time, seasons, or even stars, much like the carvings of the old world civilizations? Some theorists even wonder if the carvings speak of contact with beings beyond the forest, echoing legends of gods who came from the sky. Others suggest they may have been warnings, carved by a people who foresaw collapse or conquest, leaving behind messages for future generations. If true, what was it that they feared? These stones, often ignored as simple decorations, may hold clues that force us to rewrite the entire story of human civilization in the Americas. Imagine if tomorrow a new carving was unearthed, one that clearly depicted a forgotten ruler, a map of a lost city, or even symbols that matched those from other continents. Would we still dismiss the Amazon as a wilderness untouched by advanced societies? Or would we finally admit that its people shaped the world in ways we are only beginning to see? The jungle may have covered their cities, but the stones still speak, and their echoes grow louder as each carving comes to light, demanding that we listen to the voices of a civilization thought to be forgotten. Beneath the dense canopy of the Amazon, vast geoglyphs emerge when seen from above, their circles, squares, and lines too precise to be accidents of nature. Some researchers believe these formations were more than ceremonial spaces, suggesting they may have served as observatories to track the movements of the stars, the sun, and the moon. Could it be that the people of the Amazon were gazing at the heavens long before telescopes were ever imagined? If the alignments are intentional, then the builders were not only shaping their world on the ground, but also mapping their place in the cosmos. Across history, civilizations from Egypt to Mesopotamia to the Andes built monuments tied to celestial events, believing that the skies revealed the will of the gods. Why would the Amazon be any different? If these geoglyphs lined up with solstices, eclipses, or the rising of bright stars, they may have marked sacred times of planting, harvest, or worship. Some alignments appear to point toward the horizon, where the sun rises during solstices, suggesting a knowledge of time that rivaled old-world calendars. What secrets might these ancient astronomers have guarded as they charted the heavens above the endless sea of green? Could they have tracked cycles unknown to us, perhaps connected to myths of gods who crossed the sky in fiery chariots or serpents of light? Some theorists ask whether these patterns served as signals to distant cultures, evidence of a shared knowledge of the stars that linked continents together. Others argue they could have been used to predict floods or droughts, tying survival itself to a careful watch of the skies. Imagine standing within one of these vast designs centuries ago, looking up at the night sky, unbroken by city lights, seeing every star shimmer with clarity. Would those who stood there have felt closer to their gods, or did they see themselves as guardians of knowledge passed down from a forgotten age? The carvings in stone and the burned patterns in earth suggest that the people here were not passive observers, but watchers of the sky, connecting their lives, their myths, and their survival to the grand theater above. As each new alignment is uncovered, we are left with questions that reach beyond archaeology. Were these observatories built simply to track seasons? Or do they hold echoes of a more mysterious purpose? One that challenges everything we thought we knew about the history of the Americas. In the heart of the Amazon, knowledge may have been the most valuable treasure of all, more powerful than gold, and more enduring than stone. Ancient farmers knew how to create fertile soil in a place where most earth is poor. Shamans mastered medicines drawn from plants that could heal or harm, and astronomers mapped the skies with precision that rivaled the old world. This was knowledge that shaped empires, sustaining vast populations and guiding lives for centuries. But if these civilizations rose and fell, who held on to such secrets when the great cities disappeared into the jungle? Were there priestly rulers, guardians of wisdom, who carried forbidden knowledge in rituals and chants, passing it only to chosen heirs? Some oral traditions among indigenous groups describe keepers of sacred plants and sky watchers who spoke of times far older than memory. Could these be echoes of a priestly class that once ruled, guarding wisdom that outsiders could not understand? If this is true, then what did they fear would happen if that knowledge spread beyond their control? Some scholars suggest that much of this learning may have been hidden intentionally, kept from conquerors and outsiders who would misuse it. Others propose that fragments of this wisdom traveled far, shaping stories of gods and healers in distant lands. Could the mysterious rise of advanced agriculture in other regions be linked to seeds of knowledge carried out of the Amazon? If so, we must ask, how many of today's medicines, diets, or practices come from teachings far older than we have been told? Theories even suggest that contact with beings described as gods or visitors from the sky may have guided these priestly classes, giving them tools and understanding far beyond their age. Did these rulers see themselves as chosen, holding a pact with powers greater than humanity? Imagine standing in one of those lost temples, where rituals were performed beneath firelight, chants rising to the heavens, and secrets whispered to the next in line. Would we call them priests, scientists, or something in between? The silence of the forest has buried their voices, yet the plants, the soil, and the stars they studied still carry their legacy. Every discovery of terra preta, every carving of a serpent or star, every plant still used for healing may be part of a puzzle left behind. If knowledge is power, then what would it mean if this forgotten empire held wisdom older than Egypt, older than Mesopotamia, and possibly meant for all humanity? Perhaps the real treasure of the Amazon is not gold or ruins, but forbidden knowledge waiting to be uncovered. A gift, or warning, from a civilization we are only beginning to remember. If the evidence scattered across the Amazon is pieced together, it may point to a startling conclusion that deep in the rainforest once stood the first great kingdom of the Americas. Long before the Aztec temples rose or the Inca carved their stone cities, this hidden civilization may have flourished in silence, thriving within the dense forests and river valleys. The fertile soils known as terra preta could have supported millions, while vast networks of roads and canals tied together regions larger than many European kingdoms. Could it be that this was not a scattered group of tribes but a unified kingdom, with rulers, laws, and priests who directed its growth? If so, then the Amazon was not a wilderness at all, but the heart of an empire that has gone unrecognized for centuries. Ancient oral traditions speak of powerful leaders, gods who walked among mortals, and wars that reshaped entire regions, tales that might reflect memories of this kingdom's rise and fall. What if these stories, dismissed as myths, are echoes of real kings and queens whose palaces now lie under trees and rivers? Some scholars argue that the geometric earthworks and the wide, straight roads reveal central planning, the work of leaders who commanded thousands of workers and understood how to organize societies on a massive scale. Others suggest this kingdom may have rivaled Egypt in age, perhaps beginning as early as 5,000 years ago, which would overturn everything we think we know about the timeline of civilization in the New World. Did this forgotten empire influence later cultures, seeding knowledge that resurfaced in Mesoamerica centuries later? Or was it erased so completely by disease and conquest that only faint traces remain in the soil and the stones? Imagine what it would mean if tomorrow archaeologists uncovered a royal tomb filled with ornaments, writing, or golden idols, proof that the Amazon was home to rulers as powerful as any pharaoh. Would we be forced to rewrite history to place the Amazon at the center of humanity's story, not at its edge? This possibility stirs both excitement and fear, for it challenges the belief that civilization radiated outward from a few centers. Instead, it suggests that the first great kingdom of the Americas may have been born in the green heart of the rainforest, hidden in plain sight all along. When outsiders first entered the Amazon, they did not come only with ships and weapons. They brought disease and conquest that swept through the rainforest like a storm. Entire villages vanished. Populations that may have numbered in the millions collapsed within a few generations, leaving little behind but scattered memories. To the conquerors, the lush green world appeared empty. Yet this emptiness may have been the silence of a people erased. Some historians argue that this sudden collapse was no accident of fate, but the result of deliberate destruction, where temples were burned, roads abandoned, and oral traditions silenced. Could it be that the true history of this land was buried intentionally, hidden by those who wanted the world to believe the Amazon had always been untamed? If so, who gained by burying the truth of a civilization that may have rivaled Egypt in age and scale? Accounts from early travelers described bustling towns, organized fields, and intricate earthworks. But later explorers saw only forest, as if the earlier reports had been nothing more than fantasy. Were those first accounts suppressed, rewritten, or ignored to protect the myth of an untouched wilderness? Disease carried by outsiders wiped out communities before most Europeans ever saw them, and violence against indigenous peoples ensured that much of their knowledge was silenced. Imagine if the conquerors who stood on these riverbanks saw cities, shining idols, and sacred sites, then chose to conceal them. Would we have been told a different history? One where the Amazon was recognized as the heart of a great civilization rather than a wild frontier? Some theories suggest that this erasure was part of a larger pattern, where stories of advanced peoples were rewritten to fit the narrative of conquest. If the memory of these kingdoms was hidden, how much of the Amazon's past remains buried, not only under trees and soil, but under centuries of silence? Even today, when archaeologists uncover earthworks and soil that should not exist, they face resistance from those who cling to the old story of emptiness. What might it mean if the silence was never natural, but enforced? The shroud of conquest may not only have destroyed lives, it may have buried truths, too dangerous for the conquerors to allow. Yet the jungle still remembers, and in its carvings, soils, and myths, pieces of the hidden history push back against the silence. Today, archaeologists are turning to the skies to uncover what the jungle has hidden for centuries. With drones, satellite imaging, and laser scanners, they can peer through the dense canopy and reveal patterns invisible from the ground. Roads, plazas, and vast earthworks emerge like ghosts of a forgotten past, stretching across landscapes that once seemed untouched. Each new scan reveals details of a world far more complex than explorers once believed. What does it mean when technology confirms what oral traditions and myths have been saying all along? That mighty cities once stood beneath the green veil of the rainforest. As archaeologists walk into these sites, They find carved stones, shards of pottery, and soils enriched with nutrients that do not belong to a wild forest. The discoveries suggest design, order, and knowledge. Could this be proof that the Amazon was not a wilderness but a garden shaped by human hands, maintained by engineers and farmers whose work lasted for centuries? Every scan and excavation uncovers new mysteries, challenging the old belief that the rainforest was too harsh to support large populations. Some patterns even reveal city grids, suggesting that these builders planned their settlements with the same precision seen in Egypt or Mesopotamia. Were these aligned with celestial events, or were they designed to honor gods tied to the rivers and skies? If so, then the jungle was not simply a backdrop for survival, but the stage for a civilization that rivaled the greatest of the ancient world. Some researchers argue that we may have uncovered only a fraction of what lies beneath the leaves. What if entire kingdoms, perhaps older than Egypt itself, remain buried under roots and soil, waiting for the day they are revealed? Others question whether we are prepared for what such discoveries would mean. Would rewriting the history of the Americas threaten the stories we have long believed about the rise of human civilization? Imagine the moment when a drone scan reveals not just earthworks, but a massive temple complex or a royal city. Its design so advanced, it forces us to reconsider the very origins of architecture in the New World. The leaves may hide these secrets, but each season of research pulls another thread from the jungle's grip. Slowly, a picture is forming of a land that once thrived with knowledge, power, and belief. Its story muffled by vines but not lost forever. The Amazon is beginning to speak, and the echoes grow louder with every new discovery that breaks through the silence of centuries. The greatest loss of the Amazon's vanished civilizations may not be the cities swallowed by the forest or the temples hidden beneath the earth, but the wisdom that disappeared with them. Unlike Egypt with its papyrus scrolls or Mesopotamia with its clay tablets, the Amazon's people left no great archive of written words. Instead, their knowledge lived in songs, stories, and rituals passed down through generations. A living library carried in memory rather than ink. When disease and conquest swept through the rainforest, countless voices were silenced, and with them, entire volumes of unwritten history may have been erased. What cures, philosophies, or maps of the heavens were lost when storytellers and shamans were taken by sickness or violence? If written records had existed, would we now speak of the Amazon as one of the first great centers of civilization? Instead, we are left with fragments, shards of pottery, carvings in stone, earthworks spread across the landscape, and the oral traditions of indigenous peoples who hold echoes of this forgotten past. Could these myths and stories be the last surviving chapters of a library as vast as any in the ancient world? Some theorists wonder if secret archives might still lie buried, written in ways not yet understood, perhaps in patterns of geoglyphs, encoded into art, or hidden within ritual objects. What if we are standing on the edge of rediscovering not only lost cities, but a lost system of knowledge? One that could change our understanding of medicine, farming, and the stars. Imagine if tomorrow a sealed chamber was uncovered, filled with artifacts designed to record wisdom in a way that has yet to be decoded. Would it prove that the Amazon's forgotten civilizations once possessed libraries of their own, different from but equal in value to those of Greece or Egypt? For now, the ruins and the stories that survive act as a hidden library, scattered across rivers and jungles, waiting for those willing to listen. The question is, are we prepared to piece together its chapters, or will the forest close its pages before the truth is fully revealed? Amid the vast green expanse of the Amazon, modern tribes continue to live in ways that echo the wisdom of their ancestors, carrying fragments of knowledge that may stretch back to a forgotten age of kingdoms and cities. Their survival practices, from the careful use of medicinal plants to sustainable farming methods, suggest links to the advanced systems of their predecessors. Could these living traditions be the last threads of a much larger tapestry, one woven by a civilization that shaped the rainforest itself? Shamans still speak of spirits tied to rivers and stars, beliefs that may preserve the spiritual core of ancient cosmologies. Farmers in remote regions continue to enrich soil, using methods similar to the terra preta of the past, maintaining fertile ground in a place where most earth would otherwise fail. Hunters navigate the forest with an understanding of animal behavior that speaks of centuries of accumulated wisdom. What if these practices are not isolated survival skills, but fragments of a cultural legacy that once supported millions? Scholars studying indigenous knowledge have found striking parallels between ancient oral traditions and the material remains unearthed beneath the canopy. Stories of serpent gods, sky beings, and great wars mirror the carvings and earthworks that archaeology now reveals. Could these myths be direct memories of the ancient builders, passed down in song and ritual, surviving long after their cities crumbled? Some suggest that these living traditions are a kind of library, preserved not in books, but in the daily rhythms of survival, proof that the Amazon's true legacy is alive in the people who still call it home. Others argue that if we ignore these traditions, we risk losing the last living connection to civilizations older than Egypt itself. Imagine if a healing practice passed down for centuries turned out to be rooted in the same medical systems once used by priestly rulers of a lost empire. Would we finally see the continuity of human knowledge stretching across millennia in the Amazon? Or would we dismiss it again, leaving the truth buried under both forest and indifference? The resilience of these communities, despite centuries of conquest and change, ensures that echoes of the ancient world remain. They are guardians of memory, carrying the Amazon's true legacy. A reminder that even in silence, civilizations can speak through the survival of their people. If the civilizations of the Amazon truly predate Egypt, then everything we thought we knew about the origins of human history would have to change. For it would mean that the cradle of civilization was not confined to the river valleys of the Old World, but extended deep into the green labyrinth of South America's largest forest. Imagine the implications of such a discovery, that while Egypt's pyramids were yet unbuilt, and Mesopotamia was only beginning to rise, a vibrant network of cities, roads, and temples may have already flourished beneath the Amazon's canopy. This possibility unsettles long-held assumptions about where humanity first gathered into great societies and how knowledge spread across the ancient world. For centuries, the timeline of civilization has been drawn like a straight path beginning in the Middle East. Yet the ruins, soil, and stories of the Amazon suggest the path may instead be a web, stretching wider and earlier than scholars dared to believe. If so, the Amazon's forgotten builders may have been among the first to master agriculture, astronomy, engineering, and medicine on a grand scale, shaping their environment with foresight and skill. Their hands could have planted forests as living orchards, carved rivers into highways, and raised fields into fertile gardens. Such a vision changes not only the story of the Americas, but the story of all humanity. For it would prove that civilization was never the achievement of a single region, but a shared awakening across the globe. Some researchers whisper that this recognition has been resisted not only because of academic caution, but because it forces us to reconsider the very foundations of our understanding of progress. Could it be that Europe's explorers stumbled upon lands far older in wisdom than their own, yet dismissed them as primitive? Could it be that fragments of lost knowledge from this rainforest still linger in the traditions of its indigenous people, waiting to be seen for what they are? The echoes of a world-changing legacy? The challenge of rewriting history is immense, but the evidence grows year by year. Each new geoglyph, mound, or soil sample, adding another piece to the puzzle. If we accept the Amazon as home to one of the world's first civilizations, we are not only honoring the past but reshaping the future. For it teaches us that ingenuity is not bound to one place or one people, but rises wherever humans live close to the earth and listen to its rhythms. Perhaps the Amazon was not just a home to its people, but a center of human achievement that influenced cultures across distances we cannot yet measure. In this light, the forest is no longer only a wilderness, but a living monument to those who may have built the first great chapter of our shared human story, a civilization that truly changed the world. As the story of the Amazon's hidden kingdom draws closer to its climax, a haunting question rises. What if the people who once ruled beneath the canopy never truly vanished? Some researchers argue that the descendants of this civilization still live among modern tribes, carrying pieces of ancient wisdom hidden in their traditions, healing methods, and stories. Their songs echo the memory of rivers turned into roads. Their dances mirror celestial cycles, and their rituals preserve knowledge of plants that rival even the most advanced medicines of today. Could these be fragments of a deeper connection between past and present, suggesting that the ancient kingdom continues to live in spirit? The thought that such a lineage might still pulse within the rainforest raises more questions than answers. What if the builders left behind not only ruins, but a deliberate inheritance of wisdom? Oral traditions often describe visits from ancestors who came from the sky, teaching the people, then promising to return. Were these simply myths? Or do they hide a coded message meant to survive centuries of conquest, disease, and silence? Could some tribes hold keys to secrets the wider world has forgotten, guarding them until the time comes when humanity is ready to receive them again? Some theories even suggest that the civilization might have found ways to retreat into the deeper jungle, surviving far from the eyes of outsiders, waiting for the world to shift before revealing itself again. Such claims may sound bold, but history has shown that entire cultures, thought extinct, can reappear in the most unexpected places. If the descendants of this civilization still walk among us, what knowledge could they reveal about astronomy, agriculture, or medicine? Could they help us see the rainforest not as untouched wilderness, but as the greatest legacy of human design? This possibility challenges the idea that we are alone in our age of progress. It suggests instead that modern humanity stands on the shoulders of forgotten giants, their influence hidden, yet still shaping the way we live, eat, and heal. If they were to return in full strength, not as myth but as fact, would our world be ready to accept the truth of their existence? Or would such a revelation unsettle the foundations of history, forcing us to question every story told about where civilization began? As these mysteries linger, the Amazon continues to breathe, its trees hiding whispers of knowledge waiting for the right moment to emerge. As we reach the end of this journey, the questions grow larger and the mysteries deeper. For what if the story of civilization does not begin along the banks of the Nile or within the fertile crescent of Mesopotamia, but instead beneath the endless canopy of the Amazon, where rivers twist like silver serpents and the jungle breathes with a pulse older than time itself? The evidence uncovered across the rainforest hints at something extraordinary. From geometric geoglyphs visible only from the sky, to engineered soils that fed millions, to roads and waterways connecting what may once have been mighty kingdoms. Together, these findings sketch a picture of a world forgotten, a civilization that might not only rival Egypt in age, but surpass it in influence. If that is true, then the story of humanity must be rewritten, shifting the first chapter from deserts and rivers to the green heart of South America. But what truly lies beneath the roots of ancient trees? Could entire cities still rest, untouched, waiting for discovery? their temples buried, their libraries lost to the silence of time? Or were these worlds deliberately erased, hidden away because their truth would unravel the timeline of history as we know it? Some researchers argue that the people of the Amazon carried astronomical knowledge equal to that of the Old World, marking solstices and equinoxes with precise alignments. Others point to the oral traditions of indigenous tribes, which still speak of gods who descended from the skies, of wars fought with unseen powers, and of golden cities that vanished without a trace. These echoes may not be myths, but fragments of a truth too vast to dismiss. If such civilizations rose and fell here, then what knowledge did they pass on before the final collapse? Could the roots of agriculture, astronomy, and even spiritual belief be traced not to the east, but to this rainforest? And if so, why has this story been ignored for so long? Was it because the survivors guarded their secrets, choosing silence over revelation? Or because later powers feared a history that proved civilization bloomed in places long overlooked? Today, with drones, satellites, and archaeology breaking new ground, the jungle is slowly giving up its secrets, revealing roads, mounds, and cities once thought impossible. Yet with every discovery, more questions emerge. What if the Amazon is not just a forest, but a cradle of human achievement, one that shaped humanity's path in ways we are only beginning to understand? As the canopy closes overhead and the rivers wind endlessly forward, we are left with the greatest question of all. What if the first spark of civilization, the dawn of everything we call human, was not born in Egypt, not in Mesopotamia, but here, hidden in the heart of the Amazon, where time itself keeps the secret of the world's forgotten beginning?